I wrote my paper about Jean Francois Lyotard because he was referenced many times in Smith's book. Lyotard provides a convenient way for Smith to capitalize on the postmodern manner of legitimizing all theories of reality. As Smith wrote in Who's Afraid of Postmodernism, this book is an attempt to make off with postmodernism for the sake of the kingdom. One way to make off with postmodernism was to use it to legitimize Christianity's supposed irrationality. And Smith said, no scientific discourse, whether natural science or social science, simply discloses to us the facts of reality to which theology must submit. Rather, every discourse is, in some sense, religious. The playing field has been leveled. Theology is most persistently postmodern when it rejects a lingering correlational false humility and instead speaks unapologetically from the primacy of Christian revelation and the church's confessional language. So, I was fascinated to know more about why Lyotard was so useful to Smith and what his contribution to postmodernism
Lyotard was an academic whose writings covered a wide variety of styles and a broad range of topics. His interdisciplinary works are characterized by a central premise that reality is composed of singular events that cannot be represented or symbolized by rational conjecture. He was commissioned to write a report on the influence of technology in exact sciences that was primarily concerned with how technological transformations would impact the status of knowledge. So he wrote what's called the Postmodern Condition, a report on knowledge, in 1979. In the report, he expounds on many themes common to post-structuralist and postmodernist ideas, such as the rejection of humanism, questioning the powers of reason, asserting the importance of non-rationality, and so on. And so the ideas he presented led to marginalized people being able to speak about their experiences from their perspectives.
The themes I explored in my paper are the central themes Lyotard developed in his report. I was especially interested in how those themes were utilized by scholars from the marginalized groups to push their metanarratives forward. The postmodern origins of intersectionality, for example, happened following what is referred to as the death of the left, the civil rights, gay pride, and second wave feminism that collapsed in the 1980s and the 1990s as economic neoliberalism took hold. In her 1991 article, Mapping the Margins, Kimberlé Crenshaw first popularized the term intersectionality. Freeing themselves from white male definitions of the truth, black feminists like her began to expose the interlocking systems that defined them. As I said earlier, I chose Lyotard as the subject of my paper because Smith referred to him as a kind of foil. Lyotard served Smith by rendering modern rationality as just one more narrative myth, while allowing Christianity to engage its narrative sources. For example, at one point in his book, Smith wrote, "My point is not to suggest that Lyotard's analysis concretely helps to understand Christian faith. In other words, I'm not arguing that we look to Lyotard for assistance in understanding Christian faith commitments. Rather, Christian thinkers should find in Lyotard's critique of metanarratives and autonomous reason an ally that opens up the space for a radically Christian witness in the postmodern world." End quote. So it seems clear to me that Smith represents a hopeful trend among Christian theologists that postmodernism can lead to a resacralization of society, a world without God, in which sociological and psychological theories about religion or spirituality may not satisfy some. The notion of embracing a non-rational religious experience may be appealing. Lyotard's report was hailed as the authoritative postmodern discourse on all the, quote, natural sciences, from which he made pronouncements on developments in modern physics and mathematics. He extracted from this what he called postmodern science and offered it as the definitive subversion of scientific rationality. And what floored me was to learn that years later, in 1987, Lyotard disclosed in an interview that he had made up most of what he wrote about science. He revealed his work as an intellectual fraud, admitting that Postmodern Condition is, quote, the worst of my books, in which I made up stories, referred to quantity of books I never read. Apparently, it impressed people. By 1987, much damage had been done. The most significant damage to the legitimacy of the report, as far as science is concerned, was the body blow delivered by Lyotard himself in 1987. Nevertheless, the report continued to be canonized in postmodern academic circles. So the scene was set for a little poke from science, which came in the form of the famous send-up by Alan Sokal, now known as Sokal's hoax. Sokal submitted a nonsensical article entitled Transgressing the Boundaries Towards a Transformative Hermeneutics of Quantum Gravity to the non-peered reviewed flagship social text journal of postmodern cultural studies. Sokal was able to pull off this hoax because he had mastered what was then the well-known postmodern lingo. The fatal flaw for the journal was the postmodern practice of reducing science to social construction and rhetoric. And that is an absurdity that cannot be convincingly applied in any reality. Real gains were made for the world as postmodernism helped much of humanity find a voice. On the other hand, it has produced startlingly harmful effects, such as neoliberalism and the culture war raging in the United States at present. If I had a chance to write a longer paper, I would look into two things. First, how postmodernism paradoxically still affects the thinking and behavior of many people today, especially in the political realm. And two, the very quiet death of postmodernism. As to the first point, Mashio Kakutani, I hope I pronounced that right, addresses these harmful effects barely 2 years before the COVID-19 pandemic in her book, The Death of Truth. She said, "It's safe to say that Trump has never plowed through the works of Derrida, Baudrillard, or Lyotard, if he's even heard of them. And postmodernists are hardly to blame for all the free-floating nihilism abroad in the land. But some dumbed-down corollaries of their thinking has seeped into modern culture and has been hijacked by the president's defenders, who want to use relativistic arguments to excuse his lies, and by right-wingers who want to question evolution or deny the reality of climate change or promote alternative facts." End quote. And to my second point about postmodernism's death. Although the postmodernism Lyotard helped to usher into the world was genuinely disruptive, it has evaporated in the era of wild worldwide pandemics and climate destruction that demand values, specificity, and authenticity. Without those things, people die. And they're not dying from reading books by French philosophers about the nature of reality.